If there was a magical way with magic mushrooms to share the actual risk, not these magical ideas of like curing your depression, anxiety, and your substance use, but just the actual risk. Like, what is that actual risk? What is that short-term risk, long-term risk? What's the epidemiological data, around that? It would be so helpful.
Something in the news right now in Toronto is they're coming out with dispensaries for psychedelics. And I think the psychedelics are limited to mushrooms, which is, the word for mushrooms is?
I don't know, shrooms? Psilocybin.
Psilocybin. I was thinking the more medical term than...
I didn't know where we were going with this.
Than what you called them in college.
Yeah, psilocybin.
Psilocybin, okay. So... so setting that framework. So legally, they are, in every sense of the word, illegal. I think in Canada, the only limited exemption would be, I think there's some trials being done for psychedelics in psychiatry.
Yeah, and also it's previously shown to be helpful for people with cancer-related anxiety and angst. And so there's a couple people, you can sometimes get these special exemptions if you've got cancer and anxiety.
Okay, and who do I get that exemption from? Is it a Health Canada exemption?
I have to look it up. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I've never gone through that process.
And when you say getting an exemption, is that something I can do as a consumer, or something?
No. It has to go through all this regulation kind of stuff. We should maybe post a link about how it works. But yeah, so they've got these studies that are being done now that you need like the organization, everything has to be there. But then before this, there was just that the cancer-related anxiety or angst or suffering, because the data was quite strong for that.
But you're a practicing psychiatrist in Canada right now?
Yes, that is correct.
Do you know what the process is?
No.
Okay, so let's assume if you don't know as a practicing psychiatrist, it's a pretty elusive process. Is that fair?
Elitist, elusive, hard to figure out.
Yeah, so it's not going to be something that, if I'm sitting on my couch watching this in North Bay, I'm not going to be able to just go up to my family doctor and say, hook me up for this study.
Yes.
Probably not going to be that accessible is what we're trying to say. So we don't want to do that. Anyway, so we did find a little video that kind of just gave an overview, which we'll show. It's a short video of somebody walking into a shroom store. Hang on here. By the good folks at Narcity. Is that how you say that? We can't even get an agreement on how you pronounce Narcity.
That's how I would pronounce it. Yeah, that's exactly how.
He doesn't want to be committal.
Toronto just got its first medicinal magic mushroom dispensary, so I went and checked it out. You have to ring the doorbell to be let in, and it's actually pretty dope inside. Shout out to the artist who did these graffiti murals. Shroomy sells a bunch of psilocybin products like microdosing capsules, chocolates, gummies, teas, and dried mushrooms. Ongoing research shows that microdosing psilocybin can treat mental health disorders like anxiety, depression, OCD, and substance abuse. Right now in Canada, psychedelics are only legally available through a special assessment program or assumption request supported by a medical practitioner. Shroomies is cash only, and you have to fill out a medical form before purchase.
All right. So short, sweet, to the point. So we have about, we use this tool called Google. That's a search engine on the internet.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have tried it before. It's quite good.
Yeah. So we're going to assume that
I think something's happening with news where they're not going to get access.
That is possible. Yes. There's a challenge with that. But, and we searched Mushroom Store Toronto, and we thought there might be one, but there are several. And Shroomazy.
Yeah, I think there was two on Queen Street. I was trying to figure out where it was, if it's like, walking distance or not.
Whether we could do it for lunch.
Yeah.
So what do we think about this? So what's you have you done a lot of psychedelics yourself? See, he's not even going to commit to that.
No,
he commits
you're
to
right.
nothing.
I'm not. I commit to nothing. But the part that like stuck out was the medicinal part of it as well, right? And so they were saying it was medicinal, and that's what they did with cannabis, right? When cannabis came out, they said it was medicinal, and I think if you look back at like old whatever videos are saying alcohol was medicinal. In the 30s, they have like heroin, like cough syrup. That was medicinal.
Wasn't it under sort of a name of an elixir or something? Wasn't that
yeah, something like that? Yeah. I remember one of my old talks. I found this random picture on Google, and I gave it credit. And I put it up there just for the medicinal. Purposes.
As a young child, I remember at our cottage, my grandparents had this wallpaper, which was, I think it was taken from, I'll find some graphic of what this stuff looked like, but it was just, their entire bathroom wallpaper was of ads from the 1820s of something, right? And it included like all this, it had heroin in there, and it had like Coca-Cola with real cocaine, like that ad kind of stuff in it and stuff like that. And people going with fairs selling, going from like county fair to county fair selling an elixir. Which I'm not quite sure what that is, but I think it was. I think it was close to alcohol or something at that point.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think people do want altered states. People do want to feel better. People do want to feel different. And when Health Canada approved cannabis, as a medicine, the data wasn't actually strong at all. And in my mind, I just wondered, is this just sort of the shortcut for legalization in some way? And so they medicinalize it. People get access, for it, and then eventually it's just recreational. But the medicinal data for cannabis, it's really quite. It's not as strong as you'd think it was.
Right, and we seem to have stepped away from that. I don't hear a lot about medicinal cannabis.
No, we don't either, but we work in an addiction world, right? Or a substance use world. And I think there are still some people that are like through the insurance companies or through things that may be reaching out for in the pain world, because they're recommending a lot of medicinal cannabis, for to be opiate sparing and so forth. And from the data that I've seen, although I've not seen it all, it's just it's very few conditions. The dosage is much lower than people typically use. And the only reason that I'm sort of sharing this, right, is that like with I don't know the data for mushrooms, but about 1 in 10 people who use cannabis at some point in their life will meet criteria for dependence on it, right, or meet criteria for what somebody would call an addiction. And while there's some truth where cancer-related anxiety, there's definitely going to be a signal. I mean, there's old stuff with LSD and alcohol, right? Like it worked phenomenal for it in a couple of the studies. I don't know if it was in the 70s or 80s they used to do in New York before they banned all that research being done. Where am I going with this? I think medicinal is a problem because when you see something's medicinal, you assume it's safe. Yeah, safe and healthy. It's good for you.
Well, when you assume, the government approves something, it must be healthy. And I mean, well, that's got to be true, right? We got these cigarette products, and we've got alcohol, and the government approves those, and now they approve cannabis. So,
well, do you know the two biggest killers in terms of drugs?
I would think it would be alcohol and cigarettes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Just flip the order. Cigarettes number one, alcohol number two, right? All right. So every time someone's like, "Oh, it's better than alcohol," I'm like, it's not necessarily a good thing if it's
correct.
Yeah.
So as the only person at this table willing to admit to doing any psychedelics,
my goodness.
And in full disclosure, I've always more or less been a stimulant type guy as far as my addiction goes. But prior to my methamphetamine addiction, I did a lot of ketamine, and ketamine is known to be have some of those properties.
It absolutely does. Yeah, absolutely. Especially like at the higher doses, you can have these kinds of experiences more so than people thought it would.
Would you like to tell me about those experiences, Whip?
Well, with ketamine, I don't really know what it's about. But what I hear is that you do get into an altered state. You do have more flexibility in your thinking.
Sure.
In those environments.
Would you like me to speak to what that's like?
Well, I don't know. Do you have more experience than I do with this?
Well, more experience than I'm willing to admit to, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go through it.
So there are some now the problem with ketamine, recreational ketamine, is that it's hard to get it. That it is what it is, right? Now our drug supply, the adulterants in our drug supply, I know it's a big thing in the news now in the last couple of years, but it's not a new problem.
No.
This has been going on for decades.
Yeah, of course.
And people just sort of focus on it just limited to fentanyl. It's not just limited to fentanyl. So getting pure ketamine was very difficult to do. But when you got it, it has some very. I see the benefits to it. Let's put it that way. It allows you to sort of, in my experience, when you had the right stuff at the right dose, it allows you to kind of cut through all the noise in your mind and focus on a problem. At sort of a 30,000 feet in the air kind of view, right? You're overlooking everything, and only looking at I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does. Do you find it's also visual? Like you're almost looking at yourself?
Yes, you're definitely looking at yourself.
Interesting. So it is, yeah.
And where you can cut through it and you can figure it out. If you're really smart, you'd be writing it down as you were going, because I was able to figure out so many things when I was on that, right?
You got answers.
I got answers.
And does that, like, when you look back, because, we see sometimes people that will talk about, I function better on this, better on that. But you talk to their family, and then when they're not using anymore, like, well, maybe that wasn't the case. But it sounds like for you, ketamine does actually give some answers to thinking.
Yes. And there are a lot of great studies, and I know a lot of people in our field are advocating very strongly for psychedelics, and it's a big topic at our events that we go to and things like that, right? Just the whole bringing on psychedelics. But from my perspective of it, I can certainly see, but the perspective I'm giving is not necessarily the perspective they're talking about it for depression, right? So, like ketamine is used as a second line or third line medication.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it is. I mean, I'm not as much of a fan as I should be of the psychedelics for these mental health conditions. And I think part of it is that I think anytime you have a treatment or an intervention, we don't think about how it affects the most vulnerable, right? And maybe it's just like with cannabis, right? I work in a psych emergency department, so I see people that are using cannabis that are psychotic, and the psychosis is getting worse. And the data is so clear, right? The data is so clear that heavy cannabis use, especially from like adolescents up until like 20 or so, if you use heavily, you're like 2-3 times more likely to get psychotic disorders or bipolar disorders. They'll be more severe. And the saddest, the thing that bothers me the most is that with Canada, with legalization, with medicalization, you think the data was coming from here. But it's not. It's coming from places like Switzerland or Sweden, where they have really good tracking. I don't know. I think we don't think about the harms to the few, and I think it's just it just bothers me when we act like something's medicinal when it can harm so many people.
Sure, and there's no doubt about that. And let's not sugarcoat it. My ketamine journey did not end well.
Fair enough.
It was at its peak was upwards to. It wouldn't be uncommon for you to spend $1,000 a day on ketamine.
Oh my goodness!
So it didn't end well, folks. So I'm not.
But the point you brought up was great around the focus, right? Like because normally in our mind and there's so much noise, right? And that ability to focus. I mean, that's one of the goals of like meditation. That's one of the reasons people love some of these elite sports or these like. Because you all of a sudden you have this hyper focus, and it's a muscle you can build and develop, right? And really go at these problems from different angles.
Right. So, and we do, and perhaps we're not objective as far as looking at the consequences for psychedelics generally. Cannabis isn't considered is cannabis considered a psychedelic? No. Yeah, is it?
I mean, it has some properties of it, at certain doses, certain strains, but I don't know if it's like.
So we see, I guess what I'm saying when we're not objective, it's like people aren't coming to the emergency room with, this cannabis is really working out well for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
I'm able to sleep, my pain is treated.
Yeah. We don't work with people who have those experiences, but a lot of the pain doctors do.
Right, and but the people we're seeing are have problems, and I can attest to what Whip's saying. Especially, we have a lot of young people. You can look at the Willie Nelsons that have been using cannabis for 60 years, presumably without too much consequences. And then we know people, or I've personally supported people that have used cannabis for 6 weeks and have consequences, and they haven't used it for 6 months since. Right, and they still have consequences from it. So I'm not trying to scare anybody about anything. I'm just saying.
No, but that's where the problem comes in, because we're not giving people accurate risk, and even with things like alcohol, it's like we're not always sharing the accurate risk. We're glorifying things. We're like celebrating as a sign of elitism. When you have your scotch or your single malt or whatever that is, and I think if we have a way of sharing accurate risk, then I feel it's like more of a choice. To use, whereas if it's more like this marketing thing, but I guess technically it's the same thing with everything, right? Same thing with smartphones, same things with like gambling, same thing with the lottery tickets that we get.
Right.
People aren't aware of the accurate risks.
So I guess overall, to sort of speak about the stores that are being closed, and same thing with the cannabis stores. Prior to them, they were being closed, and the government was, in some local governments were putting concrete blocks. I'll include a picture of a store that I remember not too far from where I am right now, where they would put the city would put these big concrete blocks in front of the store, so they wouldn't be able to open their door. This is a cannabis store a number of years ago, when cannabis was illegal. And then the store would, when that happened, they would remove the concrete blocks. That took a couple of days to get a crane in to do it. That was one thing. But then in the days where the concrete blocks were there, they would have people in the street selling in front of the store. So it's kind of this game of cat and mouse or whack-a-mole or something. The way that they do this, it seems they can do it with impunity, or the consequence, the fines that they were facing were insignificant compared to the profit from selling these substances. So the same thing I understand is happening with these mushroom stores. They have been closed, they've been raided, and employees arrested. Then they open again 2 days later.
I wonder who's funding this stuff, right? Like it's
who's funding what?
Oh, just the store. Like, how can you create a business that's just constantly like shutting down, being charged, being fined?
If you make enough profit, it pays for that's who funds it. I don't believe that there's a sinister funder that's above doing that.
Interesting. So you think it's like an individual who's passionate about this and has developed that skill set?
I would suspect his passion, perhaps. I don't want to speak for them, but I would suspect that they're not so altruistic. I would suspect that the passion is profit. There's a lot of money in this stuff. Certainly in cannabis, there definitely used to be a lot of money. There isn't a lot of money now because there's a cannabis store.
It's just oversaturated? Is that the cannabis thing? There's just too many of them?
Oh, well, for people that aren't familiar with Toronto, we have a cannabis store at about every, 3 per block right now, sometimes in downtown Toronto. So yes, but originally it wasn't like that.
So with mushrooms and stuff, I think the only thing that bothers me about it is just that there's certain people that we end up working with where they enjoy the mushroom experience or the ketamine experience better than real life, and maybe that's what it should be, but it ends up encompassing sort of everything. And then the other thing is that there's with things like psilocybin, your mind starts to connect different things and be open to different possibilities. And there's some people where their lives are very structured, where it would be good to open up to ideas. But there's some people that have such open ideas, it almost just keeps going and going and going. And maybe I need to be careful because, who am I to put my own values and views on people's choices? But when it borders on the psychotic realm, or for people where there's a strong history of bipolar and then those symptoms come, I just it's hard to stop that train when it starts.
Well, I think who are you or to speak to this, or who are either of us to speak to what are the consequences of something that might be addictive? Well, I think if we don't speak, who's going to speak?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what we do every day, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not passing judgment on something, but if we're seeing consequences from people that are unwell and we don't find those consequences being reported accurately or at all, then I think do we have a duty to speak?
Yeah, because I think for all of these substances, I really think like there is a subset of people that are vulnerable. And when they start, it won't be an experience like me or you. Like, say if it's like I'm home one evening and hypothetically, if I was to take some mushrooms and I was to put on some kind of videos and sit there and just enjoy the visuals that I was getting for one night out of how many, who knows, would be very different than some of the people that I've worked with, where it becomes a staple of their daily experience, and they're searching for something that they may get it transiently, but in the long run, the psychotic symptoms can start to creep in, the losing touch with reality, what's real and what's not real. And then there's just, I don't know.
Well, I think, in fairness, doesn't every addiction start in a casual night like you just described? Like, I'm going to watch a movie and I'm going to do this, and then it's, what's the difference is that you're going to stop after that, potentially stop after that night, and other people may in 2 weeks later maybe, well, I don't know if I'm going to phone in sick from work. It's 9:30 on a Monday morning. Let's put on that movie and see what that psychedelic feels like today.
No,
right?
That's absolutely it. I think like it's I don't know. I just I think you're shaped by the place you work. I think of friends who work in the emergency department. They sometimes get really upset, when people aren't wearing seatbelts or they're not wearing helmets, or they have those like super bikes now, or those super little scooter things that like they're going like 30 kilometers an hour or 40 kilometers an hour, and you have people that are just like hanging out without a helmet and stuff, and they just get very upset because they see the accidents and they see the ones who come into the emerge, right? And I think for me, for mental health, when I hear somebody say that it's worked great for depression, anxiety, to microdose, and for substance use, it's fantastic. In my head, I'm just thinking the data's not so strong, the dosing's not so clear, we don't know what's in those capsules. And I sometimes, if I'm lucky, I think I get to see the ones where it causes harm, right? Because I'm sure there's tons of people that are isolated on their own, living their life where maybe they're not living their life as they want to or could, or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Tricky stuff.
But because we only see the ones where it tips over, right? And so I just, if there was a magical way with magic mushrooms to share the actual risk, not these magical ideas of like curing your depression, anxiety, and your substance use, but just the actual risk. Like, what is that actual risk? What is that short-term risk, long-term risk? What's the epidemiological data, around that? It would be so helpful. And seeing what happened with cannabis, where it's not fully shared. Mm-hmm. Like it's not fully shared. Like it's not fully shared that from 16 to 24, if you use cannabis heavily, your risk of developing psychosis and bipolar disorder and the illness being more severe is very, very high compared to if you didn't have those experiences. It's correlationally, it's very, very strong. And in adulthood, there's a couple of epidemiological studies that suggest that for adults, like 24 plus, if you're using cannabis regularly, like so in 3-4 years, it was this US study, they surveyed the same people. You're not more likely to have mental illness symptoms down the road. So you're not going to develop like bipolar, psychosis, things like that later if you're adult, but you're more likely to be using other drugs. Right. And so it's just like there's signals in the epidemiological literature, and I just don't know what it's going to be for the magic mushrooms. Right. And with cannabis, I don't know why.
Is it marketing that we keep adding the word magic in front of mushrooms to sort of not make it sound sort of mystical?
I was trying to put people into a trance in the audience.
Okay.
I was going to do the magic. But the thing is, I didn't have a top message. Like, but once you get that cadence, people sort of get in this like the state, the magic, and then I was going to say, it'll harm you. Be careful. It's like it's
play it at reverse speed or something, one of those things, and you get some subliminal message.
When I was in college, what do you call college in Canada? Is it university? Is college? What are they saying? They're the same thing, right? College?
No. Well. Is that what we're really getting a diversion here?
So I was in my Frosh week, or whatever.
That would be more university, I think.
There was one
community college, and they call it a university.
One guy who he's a foreign student, came in, and he used cannabis one night, and he was literally rolling in a field thinking he was on fire, right? Mm-hmm. And other than that, there was nothing unusual, like before and after, about what he thought about things, thought about the world, all that kind of stuff. And I think back to an experience that, it was a really sad story that a friend of mine had in Frosh Week, where someone had something and they jumped through a glass, whatever ceiling thing, and so, and even when cannabis was medicalized, sorry about this, I know you're biting your lip because I just keep telling stories.
No, this is good.
in
Is the
Colorado,
moral of the story that foreigners shouldn't do drugs?
no, I guess you have to say that. But well, I mean, there is that risk, right? So if you're an immigrant to another country, your risk of schizophrenia doubles, right? It's 1% of the general population. It's twice in immigrants, but we don't know if it's because of their mind before, right? Like who's the one who's going to leave their home country. But the point I was going to share was just when Colorado, when they medicalized it and then they legalized it, they had these chocolate bars, right? Which had like 10 doses of whatever cannabis. And there's one story of this like 18-year-old kid that ate the whole chocolate bar, didn't realize it was like 10 doses, jumped off a building, like jumped out a window. Like, so there's a subset of people that these things harm. And I think we just have to have a way of sharing accurate risk. And whether people weigh the risk the same way that I would, that's their choice, right?
Right. So we want people to have informed consent before they do something and knowledge, right? We want people to know what they're doing.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I think for me, that's the biggest message. Let's get that accurate risk out there. And with public health, sometimes it's all about correcting what's there.
Right.
And so sometimes they'll share snippets of information. You know, because they want to change the stigma, change this, change that. But why not have a way of sharing accurate risk, you know?
Sure.
Like accurate risk for sugar, accurate risk for calories, accurate risk for the sun and like skin conditions, you know?
Of course. So what do you think about a field trip?
Oh, is that company?
No, a field trip. No. What do you think about us doing a field trip, doing a site visit to one of these?
Let's do it.
These mushroom stores as a next venture of this, and seeing what they have to offer and what their. I mean, I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but would you be down for that?
I would be down for that. I'm a little bit worried. So I was at a friend's place not last night, 2 nights ago.
Were you doing the magic mushrooms at the friend's place?
No, but I'm just talking about my pattern of behavior.
Yes.
And we were sitting there on whatever the kitchen table was, having these like snacks. And once the snacks were done, I was rummaging around his cupboard, the fridge. I was about to eat these snacks. He's like, can you not eat the kids' treats, right? It was like these like so good snacks. And then I said, if we're going to keep hanging out, I've got to move to the family room, right? Because I don't want to keep munching on stuff. So I go sit on the chair. I'm like looking away from the kitchen. I didn't eat anything else the whole night. If I go to this shrooms place and they say like, oh, you get to like see cool colors, or this is more like a body buzz, or this is more like a exploration thing. It's more like and especially if they start using like those Sanskrit words, right? Because I think I had 3 months. I was going through all these like older scriptures around meditation and like altered states. In the 80s, 70s, 80s, when they banned all those psychedelic drugs like LSD for all that testing, there was a subset of researchers that shifted their whole focus to all these altered states. Like and meditation was one of the strategies to get into them, right? So I think if we do a field trip to a mushroom place.
No free samples for you?
Well, I don't know. Like afterwards, I might go buy some. I don't know. Like I think like I'm one of those people where the just say no thing would actually work. And if I was there, I just don't know.
So you're a bit of an easy fall for addiction, perhaps. Is that what we're saying? Is low threshold?
I'm very easily swayed by the people I'm around. I'm very easily swayed, and so I almost have to have this extra guard up. You know.
Well, I think that would be good for people because and doesn't that say a lot, perhaps too, with all the knowledge you have and all the stuff you've even shared today of your apprehension and where it's based on. You're an easy target.
I've worked with people that don't drink and their lives are better because of it. But the only reason they don't drink is because they had parents that were severe drinkers, and there was a lot of physical and emotional abuse. And they're like, I just never want to be like that. And all of their cousins that drank and the strong genetic component, they just couldn't stop. Right? They had like a handful that had died of those conditions.
Yeah.
And I think like there's certain people where it's almost better just to not to try in some ways. So
next time you hear no sample trays of meth.
Yeah,
that's the moral. That's our takeaway from this.
Yeah. But if I'm on camera, I wouldn't do anything, right?
Okay.
So it's just leave the camera on me all the time, and life will be
right. Okay.
Life will be good.
All right. So thanks for your talk on our talk on the mushroom.
But it was a bit biased though, right? Because I just talked about all the negatives. We didn't talk about how awesome it was. But I guess there'll be enough.
We didn't talk about how awesome it was. I mean, if it's awesome, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we did talk about. I shared some positivity about psychedelics generally, and I mean, this isn't an in-depth kind of medical talk of those benefits. I mean, many of your colleagues will talk for hours about.
They do, eh?
They do. Well, did you not go to the talk last year at CSAM on psychedelics? You weren't there.
No, I didn't go. No.
All right.
I find like
it was standing room only in that talk, just to give you a sense of kind of what interest there is in our field on this. There was I didn't unfortunately go to the talk either. I was at a talk, a wonderful talk on intimate partner violence across the hall from a psychedelics talk. And just to give you, it's not a scientific review, but literally people were standing in the hallway to get into this psychedelics talk and trying to listen through an open door when across the hall at the intimate partner violence talk that I chose to go to, which was wonderful, by the way. There were, 5 presenters, and there was 2 or 3 participants in the room.
Yeah, no, it is very, very topical, and I think we're working with people where there's so much suffering, and we all want that magic bullet or the silver bullet or whatever that is, and I've no doubt that this treatment's going to help so many people, and my mind always immediately goes to ones that was harmed.
Was magic a reference to magic mushrooms?
Yeah, I don't know. I use the word magic a lot here today, and but I do like. So there's this book by Michael Pollan called "How to Change Your Mind."
Okay.
I don't know what the current opinion of it is, but 2-3 years ago when I read it, it was really, really eye-opening on the possibilities and the potential of these psychedelics. And I'm always nervous about who are the subset that this treatment's going to harm. And I believe I've seen some of them in my clinical practice, some of these people where the psychedelic experiences. And so I feel bad that I'm like all like, boo psychedelics, just say no. But for people who are vulnerable to psychotic experiences and bipolar disorder, and also people where existence in their current skin is incredibly uncomfortable, I do think there's a chance that this psychedelic world
won't be their friend.
Well, they'll think it's their friend. They'll enjoy hanging out with their friend. And then when they look back at their life with that friend, they'll be like, was that really how I wanted to be and how I wanted to live?
Right. And again, I'm not trying to illustrate the negatives here at all, because that was some of the interesting, there are the folks that I've seen that have benefited from this type of therapy are a lot of people in palliative care. That I've heard about, right? Where people find out, well, let's say something that's good then, right? Like, so let's talk about
phenomenal.
that.
It's phenomenal for those patients.
Right. So you're talking about somebody who, the one not young lady, she was a 65-year-old lady that was in, I'm not even sure where the program is, but she was told that she's got, kind of 8 months to live because of cancer. And that's what she was told. She chose not to go to chemotherapy, and that was a decision she made based on the consequence of that. So she, packed everything up and waited for the end. She got all her affairs in order. That took 2 days or something. And
good for her. That's pretty quick.
And she,
well done.
Well,
I would love to be able to get my affairs in order in 2 days.
But then what?
Yeah.
Then what? Right. But she, her doctor convinced her to go into this program to test this out. Right. It was a trial program, and it showed how wonderful her life became. Yeah. It opened up so many doors and possibilities for her.
Yeah. I'm so glad she had that experience.
And there wasn't there isn't the same addiction concerns that you and I have for folks.
No. And like sometimes if it's like a one-time experience, if it's a several-time experience, even if it's like once a week experience, for me the problem is when it's sort of this like macro dosing daily, like that's where.
Right. But for her, even if it was macro for dosing for her for 8 months. She contacted friends she hadn't heard from in decades, right? Yeah. She was able to reconnect with people, and it was just a wonderful. She went on walks. She took a trip. All these things that she'd never done in her whole life were possible because of that.
I just want to thank you for sharing that, because I felt so bad because I was just saying negative. And I think the only reason I'm doing that is because all I'm hearing about is this wonderful potential. And I didn't want anyone who chose to listen to all this think that psychedelics are the next devil or boogeyman or whatever that is. And so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
There's something very special when people can open their mind to possibilities.
Right, and so there are benefits and there are detriments, and things can also, at a science level, I think sometimes we look at things that at this, thinking that we're going to come up or you guys are going to come up with something that's so special and specific, and perhaps you do, but then the marketing gets muddled, and then it becomes it ends up being supplied by Mexico and the underneath and something completely different. But so it's nothing's as simple as it appears. But there are good and bad in a lot of things, and so let's. But I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, and great pickup and noticing. I didn't know they were having storefronts now.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, please feel free to like and subscribe. That way you'll get notified when we come out with new content. We try to come out with new content about every week or so. So anyway, thanks again and see you soon.